He found her chained to a wagon wheel by the road, a board nailed on, "Cursed." The sign was pine board, rough cut, the letters burned in with a running iron. Somebody had taken their time with it. That's what I noticed first, not the woman, not the chain, not the fact that it was February and the wind was coming off the high plains like it had something personal against the living. What I noticed first was that somebody had taken their time, had heated the iron, let it cool a little, pressed it careful, moved it slow so the letters wouldn't run. Cursed. All capitals. Like they wanted to make sure God himself could read it from a distance. She was sitting on the ground beside the wagon wheel, not slumped. Sitting up straight back against the wheel's hub, knees pulled in, arms behind her at an angle that would have been agony after an hour. The chain ran from a bolt sunk in the axle hub, around her wrists twice, and there was a lock on it about the size of a man's fist. Someone had put some money into that lock. It wasn't a thing you'd buy to chain up a dog. It was a thing you'd buy to chain up something you were afraid might get loose. My horse smelled her before I did, the smoke and the cold and something underneath that I'd later know was fever, and he slowed without me asking him to. Roan was 12 years old and he had better judgment than most men I'd ridden with. I let him slow, let him stop, sat there in the road about 30 feet out and looked. She looked back. Brown eyes. The kind that don't ask for anything. She looked at me the way you look at weather coming, not frightened, not hopeful, just watching to see what it was going to do. I didn't say anything. Climbed down, tied Roan to the wheel's top spoke and walked around to where I could see the lock. It was a Scandinavian padlock, heavy forged iron. The chain was log chain, the kind used to drag timber. The bolt in the hub had been peened over on both sides. Someone had planned this, had come out here with tools and metal and a purpose, and they had done the job right. I looked at the bolt for a while. Then I went back to my saddlebag and got the short pry bar I carried for pulling shoes. She still hadn't said a word. I hadn't either. I got down in the dirt beside the axle hub and worked the pry bar behind the bolt head and started leaning into it. The wood was iron-hard winter oak and it didn't want to give. I worked it for maybe 10 minutes, repositioning, getting better purchase, until I felt the first give, and then I kept at it until the bolt came out of the hub with a sound like a small caliber shot. The chain went slack around her wrists. She brought her arms in front of her and I saw her face change, not relief exactly, more like a man who's been holding his breath underwater finally breaking the surface. She didn't make a sound. She looked at her wrists, still wrapped in chain, and then she looked up at me. "You got somewhere to go," I said. She thought about it, which told me something right there. Most people would have said yes automatic, even if it was a lie. She thought about it. "No," she said. Her voice was lower than I'd expected. She'd been out here a while, 2, 3 days by the look of her. There was ice in her hair, just a little, where it had melted and refrozen under the wagon's shade. Her lips were cracked. Her hands, when I unwound the chain from them, were stiff and mottled purple-white, and she winced getting her fingers straight, but she didn't cry out. I coiled the chain and set it aside. Pulled the board off the wheel where they'd nailed it. It took 3 pulls. They'd used 3-inch spikes, and I broke it across my knee and dropped the pieces in the road. "Can you stand?" I said. She put a hand on the wheel spoke and got herself up. She had to stay there a moment with both hands on the spoke, getting her legs under her. Then she let go and stood. She was maybe 5'4", I'd say late 20s, wearing a coat that might have been good 6 years ago and boots that were starting to separate at the sole on the left. She was watching me with those flat brown eyes. "My name is Cal Dupree," I said. "I'm a deputy marshal out of Tucson, riding circuit up to Flagstaff and back. I've got a spare horse blanket, a fire kit, and enough bacon and hardtack to get 2 people to the next town. That's Ridge Rock, about 14 miles. You want to ride up behind me, I'll take you there." She looked at Roan, looked at me. "Why?" she said. I picked up my pry bar and walked back to the saddlebag. "Because you need a ride and I've got a horse." She didn't move for a moment. I kept my back to her and made some business of receipting the pry bar in the bag. Gave her time. A person who'd been chained up by the people around them needed to come to things on their own terms. "All right," she said. Her name was Delia Marsh. I got it about an hour into the ride, when the warmth of Roan and the blanket I'd wrapped her in had started working on the cold that was in her, and she talked a little. She was the widow of a man named Thomas Marsh who'd ranched 12 miles south of Redrock. He died 8 months back, some kind of fever that took him in 4 days. She'd buried him herself because by the time he died the hands had gone, and her nearest neighbor was 6 miles. "That neighbor," she said against the back of my coat. "When Thomas died he came around, to offer help, then to offer something else. When I told him no, he started with the talk." "What kind of talk?" I said. "That Thomas caught that fever because of me, that I'd brought something wrong with me when I came from Abilene, that I'd touched things, that things died around me." A pause. I felt her breath on the back of my neck, cold still. "His wife. She had a baby stillborn last spring. He told everyone that was me too." I rode. "The people in Redrock," she said. "I used to go in for supplies once a month. About 3 months ago, the feed store told me he couldn't sell to me. Then the dry goods. Then a woman threw water on me from a second-story window when I rode down Main Street. Just water, but she was shaking when she did it. I could feel her behind me. She was holding on to my coat but not leaning, staying up on her own. I stopped going in. Then 2 weeks ago 4 men came out to the ranch, said I needed to leave. I said it was my land, Thomas and I had a deed. They said the deed didn't mean anything because Thomas was dead and I'd killed him." Another breath. "They brought the chain with them." I didn't say anything for a while. The road ahead was empty, just frost-gray sage and the high red rock starting to build on the western horizon. "How long were you there?" I said. 3 days, I think. The second night was harder." I thought about that. 3 days in a February wind, chained to a wagon wheel on an empty road. 3 days with no water. 3 days sitting up straight because the angle of the chain made lying down impossible. "What were you going to do," I said, "if I hadn't come?" A long pause. "I don't know," she said. "I kept thinking somebody would come." "Somebody did," I said. She didn't answer, but I felt some of the held-back tension in her go just a little, like she'd put something down. Redrock was a town of about 400. I'd ridden through it twice before on circuit. A main street of maybe 12 buildings, a church at the north end, a livery and a marshal's office sharing a building at the south. The marshal's name was Burl Feeney. He was 63, had been marshal here 11 years, and he had the look of a man who'd learned to measure the shape of trouble before deciding whether to step into it. I rode into town with Delia behind me in the middle of the afternoon. People on the boardwalk saw us, saw her. I felt the shift before I heard anything, the way people stopped moving, the way a group of 3 women outside the dry goods store turned as one. A boy threw a rock. It clipped Roan's flank and Roan sidestepped but didn't bolt. I turned and looked at the boy. He was maybe 14. He looked back at me, at the badge on my coat, and then he looked at the ground. "Next one," I said. "You'll be sweeping the jail with your face." I heard a woman say loudly, "You've brought her back here." "I've brought a citizen back to town," I said. "She's got a land deed and water rights 12 miles south and she's going to need a room and a doctor. Anybody throws anything else, I'll know what to do with them." I rode to the marshal's office and tied up and helped Delia down. She was steadier than she'd been at the road but still not quite right. I kept a hand at her elbow without making a show of it. Feeney was inside, feet up, reading a month-old newspaper. He put it down when I came in. He looked at Delia. Something moved across his face and then he got it under control. "Deputy Dupree," he said. "Didn't know you were coming through. Found this woman chained to a wagon wheel 14 miles south on the Flagstaff Road," I said. 3-inch spikes, Log chain, lock on it. Someone had burned a board with the word cursed on it and nailed it to the wheel. I set my hat on his desk. I want to know who. He was quiet for a moment. That's a civil matter, Dupree. The people in this town have concerns about. I want to know who, I said again. He looked at Delia. She was standing just inside the door, coat still wrapped around her, looking at the far wall. Ezra Pell, he said, and some of his hands. He's got a place east of the Marsh Ranch. Pell come in today. He comes in most days. Then I'll wait, I said. You got a room for Mrs. Marsh. Somewhere she can sit that's warm and not in front of a window. He looked like he was going to say something. Then he just stood and led us back to the two-cell jail, empty both, and opened one. It's not, he started. It's warm and it locks from the inside, I said. That's what we need. He went and got a blanket from the back room and a tin cup of coffee, which I thought was something. Delia sat on the cot. She held the coffee in both hands and let the heat work on her palms. I stood in the doorway. I'll go find the doctor, I said. Get him to come look at your hands and check for the fever. She looked at me over the rim of the cup. Why are you doing this? She said. Really? I thought about that the way she'd thought about the first question I asked her. Because what they did to you was wrong, I said, and I'm in a position to do something about it, so. She kept looking at me, not like most people look when they're trying to read you, more like she was already reading and just letting it finish. All right, she said, same word she'd used at the wagon wheel. I went to find the doctor. His name was Whitmore, and he was young, 30 at most, and he'd come to Redrock from somewhere back east. He had clean hands and a careful way of moving, and when I told him what I needed, he started putting his bag together without asking a lot of questions, which I appreciated. Walking back to the jail, he told me he'd seen Delia in town a few times before the trouble started. She seemed perfectly ordinary to me, he said. Her husband was sick and she came in looking for quinine bark. I sold her some. He paused. He still died. Fevers kill people, I said. They do. He was quiet a moment. Pell's wife had that baby stillborn in April. These things happen, but people need a reason, and she was there. She was there, and she was a widow, and she had a deed to good land, I said. He glanced at me. Yes, he said, that too. Delia let him look at her hands and check her temperature and listen to her lungs. She answered his questions plainly and didn't fuss. He told her she had mild frostbite on 2 fingers of her right hand and the beginning of something in her lungs, not pneumonia yet, but the road to it. He gave her a packet of something to steep in hot water twice a day, told her to stay warm and eat, and then he looked at me. She should stay put for a week at minimum, he said. I looked around the jail cell. I'll see about a room at the hotel. I wouldn't, he said. Millie Greer runs the hotel. She's one of Pell's wife's best friends. I thought for a moment. What about you, Doc? You got a spare room? He thought about it. I've got a storeroom, he said. There's a cot in it already. It's warm. I looked at Delia. All right, she said. Ezra Pell came into the Redrock saloon at 4 in the afternoon. I knew because I'd asked the boy who swept the boardwalk outside to let me know, and he had, because $1 is $1 and boys are boys. Pell was a big man. 6'2", maybe 220, broad through the shoulders, with a thick blonde-gray mustache and the hands of someone who'd actually done ranch work once, 20 years ago. He had 2 hands with him. They looked like men who came cheap. I walked into the saloon about 5 minutes after he did. He was at the bar. The room noticed me. I walked to the bar and stood 2 men down from him and ordered a beer and drank it about halfway before I said anything. Ezra Pell, I said. He turned, saw the badge, took his time looking at it. Marshal, he said. Deputy Marshal, Cal Dupree out of Tucson. I put the beer down. I found Delia Marsh this morning, 14 miles south on the Flagstaff Road, chained to a wagon wheel, 3 days. His face didn't move much, a small thing around the eyes. "Heard she'd been causing problems," he said. "Heard the people around here had to take measures." "What people?" I said. "Concerned citizens." "Names?" He turned to face me fully. He was taller than me by 2 inches and outweighed me by 40 pounds, and he had the settled ease of a man who'd been the biggest thing in the room for a long time. "Now see," he said, "I don't know what she's been telling you." "I'd like the names," I said, "of the men who chained her, and I'd like to know who made the sign." He looked at his hands with a chain and a lock. He looked at them the way you decide how much something is worth. Then he looked at me and decided I wasn't worth much and said, "You're going to need more than her word to make anything of this, deputy." "I've got the chain," I said. "I've got the lock. I've got the bolt out of the axle hub which somebody drove through and peened on both sides, which means they came prepared. And I've got Mrs. Marsh, who can identify the men who brought the chain." I picked up my beer. "And I've got a federal warrant authority that extends to the use of illegal imprisonment and the deprivation of a citizen's rights, which is what you've done. Which makes it my business, not a civil matter and not a local matter." He was quiet. His hands were still on the bar. "Thomas Marsh's death was natural," I said. "You know that. His wife's property is her property under territorial law, and you know that too. What you did was a crime. What I'm going to do is give you one opportunity to tell me what I want to know and to stay the hell away from Delia Marsh and her land from this point forward. If you don't take that opportunity, I'll have you and your men in federal custody by morning." One of his hands, a young one, maybe 22, with a cavalry sergeant's bearing, had moved his right hand off the bar. "Don't," I said without looking at him. I was looking at Pell. The young one's hand stopped. Pell looked at me for a long time. I let him look. I'd been looked at by men like this before, and the secret of it was not to help them get to what they were trying to figure out. You just let them sit with it until they came to the conclusion you needed them to come to on their own. "My foreman," he said. "Man named Greer, he'll know the names." "Where is he?" "Bunkhouse, east of town, half-mile." "You're going to send one of your boys to get him," I said. "And you're going to tell him to come here and talk to me. And while we wait, you're going to sit at that table in the corner and have your drink and be civil." He held my eye for one more beat. Then he nodded once. He sent the cavalry sergeant hand out, and I sat at the bar and waited. And in 40 minutes, a lean, weathered man with red-brown skin and an old scar down his neck walked into the saloon and looked around and found me the way men find each other in rooms. His name was Hazel Greer. He sat down and told me everything. He told me like a man who'd been waiting for something to crack open so he could get the weight of it off him. Pell had organized it. 4 men had done it, Greer himself, 2 other hands named Dutchamp and Collie, and Pell's younger brother Reg, who rode over from his place 15 miles north. Greer had made the sign. He said he'd burned the letters carefully because he wanted to make sure people could read it. I said I'd noticed. He looked at the bar. "She didn't do anything," he said. "She was just there, and Pell wanted that land." "I know," I said. "I don't feel good about it," he said. "You shouldn't," I said. "I need you to write down what you just told me. Names, dates, what was done, sign it. I'll have it witnessed." He wrote it out. His hand shook a little, but his writing was clear. Feeney witnessed it. Greer looked like he'd put down something heavy. I folded the statement and put it in my coat. "If Pell comes near Mrs. Marsh or her land," I said to Greer, "this goes to the federal judge in Tucson and all 4 of you face trial. That includes you. You understand?" He understood. That was a Thursday. On Friday, I went to the county registrar's office and sat with the register himself, a thin, dry man named Alt who smelled of ink and nervous sweat, and I had him pull the Marsh deed and the water rights, and I went through them line by line, and confirmed they were in order, and had Alt sign a statement that the deed was valid, and the property was not abandoned under territorial law, and could not be claimed by adjacent landholders for a period of 1 year from the date of the owner's last occupancy. Delia had been at the ranch until the men came. 6 weeks from now, she'd need to be back on it. Friday afternoon, I went back to Whitmore's storeroom. She was sitting up on the cot, wrapped in 2 blankets, steeping the medicine packet in a tin cup. She'd combed her hair. I don't know why I noticed that. The cold had put some color back in her face. Her right hand, the bad fingers, she was keeping in her lap. I sat in the chair by the small window and told her what I'd done. The statement, the names, the deed confirmation. She listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "What does that mean practically?" "It means Pell won't move on your land. Not while I'm holding what I'm holding. It means if you go back to the ranch in the next 6 weeks, the deed is valid and you're within your rights, and anyone who interferes is facing federal charges." "If I go back," she said. "If I said." She looked at the cup in her hands. "I don't know if I can run a ranch by myself. Thomas had 4 hands. He knew what he was doing. I know some of it." "Not all of it." "A good foreman would know the rest," I said. "I can't afford a foreman." "You might be surprised," I said. "Hazel Greer's probably going to need a new situation." She looked at me, "The man who made the sign." "He came and told the truth when I gave him the chance," I said. "That's something." "Is it enough?" "That's your call," I said. She thought about it, looking at the cup. The room was small and warm and smelled of the medicine and of the dried herbs Whitmore kept in paper bags on the shelf. Outside, the February light was starting to go orange and thin through the window. "What are you going to do?" she said. "I've got to be in Flagstaff by end of the month," I said. "I'll stay through the weekend. Make sure things are settled here. And then I ride north." She nodded slowly, not like she was accepting it, more like she was measuring it. "Do you always do this?" she said. "Ride into a thing like this and set it straight and then ride on?" "It's the work," I said. "Is it?" I looked at her. She was looking at me in that level way she had, not accusatory, not soft, just looking. "I've been doing this for 11 years, I said. "The circuit, small towns, things that have gone sideways, I ride in. I try to set them right, I ride out." "Do you like it?" she said. I thought about that honestly. "I'm good at it," I said. She made a small sound, not quite a laugh. "That's not what I asked." "No," I said, "I suppose it isn't." She waited. "It gets quiet," I said. "After a while, the riding, the sameness of the work, it's good work, important work, but," I looked at my hands, "there's nobody waiting anywhere when you ride out, that's the part. There's nobody's door where the lamp's on." I didn't know why I was saying that. I didn't usually talk this way. Delia Marsh had a way of asking a question and then just leaving room after it, and the room pulled things out of you. "No," she said, "I wouldn't imagine there is." A pause. "I had that, a lamp." She looked at the window. "Thomas would stay up if I went out to the barn at night for anything, would keep a lamp going even if it was just 15 minutes. She turned the cup in her hands. "That sounds like a small thing." "No," I said, "it doesn't." She looked at me again. "Stay through the weekend," she said. "But don't leave Sunday. Wait until Monday. There's something I want to ask you, and I'm not ready to ask it yet." That surprised me. I didn't show it. "All right," I said. That night I walked back to Whitmore's and told Delia what had happened. She listened from the cot with the blankets around her. When I was done, she said nothing for a long time. Then she said, "Pell wanted the land." "Yes," I said. "That's all it was." "That's most of it," I said. "The rest of it, the sign, the chain, that's what happens when men like Pell convince smaller men that something they're doing for their own reasons is actually the Lord's work. Greer believed it by the end, or believed it enough." I looked at my hat. "Fear does that. Takes what a powerful man wants and dresses it up as righteousness, and hands it to people who need something to be certain about. She thought about that. The women too, she said. The woman who threw water on me. Yes, I said. She was afraid of me. She was afraid of something and you were available, I said. She was quiet again. The lamp in the corner was burning low and threw long shadows. Thomas was a good man, she said. He never used the land as a reason for anything. There was a family, the Estradas, who'd been squatting on the south corner of our property for 2 years by the time we came. He went and talked to them. We let them stay. They helped with the calving for 3 seasons. She looked at the lamp. He would have hated this. What Pell did, he would have. She stopped. He was not a man who raised his voice, but there were things that could make him very quiet in a particular way. I know that kind, I said. Yes, she said, I think you do. We sat with that for a while. Is Greer going to be all right? She said. What I mean is, are the other men going to cause him trouble for talking? Pell's smarter than to make more trouble right now, I said. And Greer's lived in this valley 15 years. He's got standing of his own. He'll be all right. She nodded. Get some sleep, I said. Whitmore said the fever needs rest. I know what fever needs, she said. I nursed Thomas through 2 of them. I stood up. Dupree, she said. I waited. You said earlier that there's no lamp anywhere. No door, she was looking at the wall. How long has it been like that? Long time, I said. By choice. I thought about it honestly. More by accumulation, I said. You start out writing and it becomes what you are and then you don't know how to be anything else, or you tell yourself you don't. She looked at me then. There are men like that, she said, and there are men who tell themselves they're like that. I put on my hat. Good night, Mrs. Marsh, I said. Good night, Deputy Dupree, she said, not unkindly. Saturday the town had the feel of something that had been told to sit down and wasn't comfortable sitting. I walked the main street twice in the morning and went into the feed store and the dry goods and the saloon and had plain conversations and let the badge do the work a badge does, which is mostly just being present and being steady. People know what a federal deputy means, and mostly they'll adjust themselves around it if you give them time. I had breakfast both mornings at the only cafe, a place run by a Mexican woman named Senora Castillo, who'd been in Reed Rock longer than the church and who made coffee so thick you could stand a spoon in it. She'd watched me come in the first morning and asked if I was the one who'd brought Delia Marsh back. I said I was. She put an extra piece of bread on my plate, that was all. But it told me what I needed to know about the actual shape of opinion in the town, which is never what the loudest voices make it seem. Feeney came and found me Saturday afternoon. He sat across from me in the cafe and wrapped his hands around his coffee and looked at the table for a while before he said what he'd come to say. I should have done something, he said. When Pell started his talk, when people stopped selling to her, I should have stepped in. Yes, I said. He looked up. You should have, I said. That's the truth, but you know it now. A lot of good it does her now. She's alive, I said, and she has her deed and her rights and Pell's hands standing between her and a federal charge. It's something. I picked up my coffee. A man knows when he failed. That's not nothing either. Most men don't let themselves know it. He was quiet for a while. She's staying in Reed Rock, he said. Going back to the ranch, I think, in a few weeks when she's stronger. He nodded. I'll make sure nobody bothers her when she comes in for supplies. I should have done that from the start. You can do it now, I said. He nodded again, got up, stood there a moment. She's a good woman, Dupree. Anyone who spent 5 minutes with her would know. She brought soup to the Alvarez family when their boy had measles last winter. He stopped himself. Anyway, I said. He put his hat on and went out. Sunday afternoon, Whitmore said Delia was well enough to sit up for a few hours in his front room, which he said could serve as a parlor if you ignored the anatomy diagrams on the wall. I went and sat with her, and we played a game of cards for a while with an old deck of Whitmore's that was missing the 4 of clubs. Delia had the kind of card sense that she never made a show of and never explained. She just won. About the third hand, she said, I used to help Thomas with the books. The ranch accounts, I know numbers. Good skill, I said. Thomas said I had a better head for it than he did. He was better with cattle and horses. I was better with the ledger and the planning. She laid down her cards. I know what's on that land. I know what we planted for spring. I know what the calf count should be and what the winter losses usually run and what we had in the account at the bank in Flagstaff when Thomas died. She looked at me. Nobody asked. Everyone just assumed I was just there, that I didn't know anything. You know a lot, I said. I could run it, she said, with the right help. I looked at my cards. I believe you, I said. Do you? She wasn't challenging, just checking. Yes, I said, I do. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, I want to ask you something. The thing I said I wasn't ready to ask yet. Go ahead, I said. After Flagstaff, when you ride back south on the circuit, do you come back through Reed Rock? I thought about the circuit. The route was Tucson, up through the Pinal Mountains, Flagstaff, back down through the Eastern Valley towns, then west through Reed Rock and on to Tucson. 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how much trouble there was. I do, I said. When you do, she said, I want you to come to the ranch, not just Reed Rock, out to the ranch. She was looking at her cards. I'll have it running by then or close to. I want to show you what it can be, what I can make of it. She looked up. And I want to see if you're still the same man who pulled that bolt out of an axle hub and didn't say a word for 20 minutes. Still that man, I said. Maybe, she said, people change. Not the deep down parts, I said. She almost smiled, not quite. More like the shape of one, like something warming under the surface that wasn't ready yet to come up. Come back through, she said, and I'll make you a meal that isn't hardtack, and we'll see. I put my cards down. All right, I said, same word, we'd both been saying it, I hadn't noticed until then. She noticed, a small shift in her eyes. All right, she said back. And we played another hand of cards with the deck that was missing the 4 of clubs, and outside the February light went red and low against the buildings of Reed Rock, and neither of us said anything else about it. I rode out Monday morning. Delia came to the door of Whitmore's office to see me go. She had both blankets around her and the bad hand in against her side. She was standing in the doorway watching, and I was checking the cinch on Roan and making sure the saddlebags were balanced. And when I turned, she was just watching. I walked over to her. You've got the statement, I said. Feeney's got a copy. You've got the registrar's confirmation of the deed. Anyone gives you trouble, you send word to the marshal's office in Tucson. I know, she said. Whitmore will see you right until you're well enough to travel. I know that too. I stood there for a moment. We were about 4 feet apart. The cold was easier than it had been a little. The light had some yellow in it. Thank you, she said, for the pry bar. I didn't know what to say to that. It made me want to laugh, and I didn't show that either. Glad I had it, I said. She put out her good hand. I took it. Her grip was stronger than you'd expect. She held on a moment, and I felt the specific weight and temperature of her hand in mine, cold still, a little at the fingers but warm at the palm, warm from the blankets and from being alive and on her feet in February in a town that had tried to stop her from being either. She let go. I went and got on my horse. When I was mounted, I looked back. She was still in the doorway, looking at me the way she'd looked at me from the wagon wheel, watching to see what the weather was going to do. I touched the brim of my hat. She didn't wave, she just looked, and then I turned Roan north and went. The thing about riding a circuit is the sameness of it shapes you. After long enough, it stops feeling like loneliness and starts feeling like what you are. The empty road, the change of light, the way the land reads different in winter than spring, the particular sound of one horse's hooves on frozen ground. You start to think maybe this is enough. Maybe a man like you, careful, apart, moving always, is made for this and not for the other thing. The lamp in the window, the voice in the dark. I thought about it more than I usually thought about such things, those 4 weeks up in Flagstaff and on the road between. I dealt with a land dispute in a town called Cinder Creek, where two brothers had been snarling over their dead father's acreage for 3 years, and a counterfeiting operation out of a print shop on the edge of Flagstaff that turned out to be run by a man with 3 children and a sick wife who had simply run out of other options, and a stabbing at a mining camp that turned out to be self-defense, and the usual accumulation of human disorder that rides in a circuit deputy's saddlebag. I did the work well. I always do the work well. That's the only pride I've ever taken that seemed solid, the doing of the work, the getting of it right, the steady showing up to what was needed. A man who works that way doesn't have to be loud about anything. But at night I'd be in some cold room in some town and I'd be looking at the ceiling and thinking about the shape of her hand. Not a soft thought, not sentimental, just the specific weight of it, the grip, the warmth at the palm where the blanket had been, and the way she'd said all right that second time, all right, same word but with something different behind it. A decision, not just an agreement. And the way she'd said, we'll see. I'd carried things in my life, things I'd seen, things I'd done, things that had been done to me once, a long time back before I took the badge. You carry them and they go quiet after a while, but they don't leave. A man who's learned to carry things quietly gets so good at it that he stops noticing the weight. Stops noticing that he's always a little braced for the next thing, always a little apart. It just becomes the texture of living. What she'd carried was different. 3 days on frozen ground chained to a wheel, waiting, not knowing if anyone would come, and then getting up when it was over and thinking about it clearly and asking what she needed to know to make a decision. That was something. That was a particular kind of strength that I'd seen in very few people, men or women. The kind of strength that isn't about not being afraid. It's about being afraid and choosing anyway. Being cold and hurt and alone, and deciding to sit up straight. I thought about that on the night roads north of Flagstaff, the stars enormous and cold overhead, Roan's breathing steady as a clock under me. I thought about a man spending 11 years becoming the only person he was responsible for. How clean that was, how simple, and how it could become, after long enough, less like freedom and more like a habit you'd forgotten how to question. And I thought about Delia Marsh sitting at that table going through her ledgers, the stub of pencil worn almost to the wood, the calculations in her close, neat hand. I turned south out of Flagstaff on a Thursday morning with the mountains still carrying snow and the air just starting to think about spring. 6 weeks since I'd ridden north, maybe a little more. The Marsh Ranch was set back about a 1/4 mile from the road, a single-story house of adobe and timber with a low fence around a kitchen garden that was just now showing the first green. 2 horses in the side paddock, a linta that had had work done on it, new timber along the top beam, new mud plaster on the south face. The kitchen garden had a new gate. I turned off the road. There was smoke from the chimney. The front door opened before I got to the fence. It wasn't Delia at the door. It was a man lean, with a weathered face and a scar on his neck that I recognized. Hazel Greer. He looked at me and then looked past me at the road. "Deputy," he said. "Greer," I said, "she take you on." He had the expression of a man still deciding what he owed for what he'd done. "Came out 3 weeks ago," he said. "Said she needed a foreman and would I do it for 40 and found and she'd never mention the sign again." I said yes. He paused. "She doesn't mention it. But she doesn't forget it either. I see her look at me sometimes." "That's fair," I said. "Yes," he said, "I know it is." He stepped back from the door. "She's in the back working the books." I tied Roan and went inside. The house was small and kept very well. A table, 2 chairs, a wood stove throwing good heat. On the table, spread out in a way that told you someone had been working through them systematically, were ledger books, receipts, a sheet of her own calculations in a neat close hand, a stub of pencil, worn almost to the wood. She came from the back room. Same brown eyes, same level look. She'd filled out some, the hollows were gone from her face. She was wearing a work shirt and boots that had been resoled and a braid over one shoulder that she'd pushed back. She looked at me. "You came back," she said. "Said I would," I said. She looked at me for a moment more. Then she went to the stove and put the kettle on. "Sit down," she said. "I'll show you the books." We sat at the table with the ledgers between us, and she showed me the spring plan, the calf count, the grazing rotation, the account balance in Flagstaff, the planting schedule for the kitchen garden, the list of repairs and what they'd cost and what was left. She went through it plainly, not explaining herself, just presenting the facts. The operation was small, but it was sound. Better than sound, it showed a particular kind of intelligence, the kind that sees the whole of a thing and manages each part of it back toward the whole. I looked at the numbers and the plans, and then I looked at her. "You've done something real here," I said. She looked at me levelly. "I know," she said. Not arrogant, just true. She knew what she'd done, and she wasn't going to pretend otherwise or be modest about it for my comfort. I looked at my hands on the table. I'd been rehearsing nothing. I didn't have a way of saying what I'd come to say. I'd been a man who rode alone for 11 years, and I didn't have the words because I'd never needed them. "I thought about you," I said, "the whole way up and the whole way back." She waited. "That doesn't happen," I said. "On the circuit, I go from one thing to the next and I stay in each thing, and when I leave it's gone. That's how I work. It hasn't happened before." She was very still. "I'm saying," I said, "I'm not good at saying this. I'm saying if there was a reason for me to come back through here more regular, if you wanted that, I'd want that." Silence. The kettle was starting to heat. Somewhere outside one of the horses in the paddock blew. "More regular," she said. "Yes." "How regular?" "As regular as you'd want," I said. She looked at me for a long time. That same measuring look. Not giving anything, not taking anything, just looking at what was there. "Come outside," she said. She got up and I followed her out the back of the house to where there was a low bench against the south wall where the adobe had caught the sun and held it. The air was cold, but the wall was warm against the back. She sat on the bench and I sat beside her, and we were close enough that I could have reached for her hand if I'd decided to. The land spread out south and west, winter-brown still, but with the first suggestion of green starting up through it, the way spring comes to high country, quietly in small places. The kitchen garden with its new gate, the paddock fence that had been fixed, the linta with its new beam, the land going out to a line of cottonwoods along a creek, cottonwoods just now leafing, the new leaves catching the afternoon light and throwing it back silver green. "When I was chained to that wheel," she said, she wasn't looking at me, looking at the land. "I thought it's strange what you think in something like that. I wasn't thinking about Thomas. I was thinking about this place, the South Field. I kept thinking about the South Field and what it needed for spring, and whether Greer would remember what I told him about the planting schedule, and I was angry. I was more angry than scared. I was angry at wasting time. I was angry at sitting there when there was work that needed doing." She paused. "And then you came," she said, "and you didn't say much, and you got down in the dirt with a pry bar and you worked on that bolt for 10 minutes and you didn't say a word. You just did the thing that needed doing, and I thought that's a man." She turned to look at me. Not a man who announces himself, not a man who tells you he's capable. A man who just reaches for what needs doing and does it, and then asks a plain question and waits for a plain answer. I held her look. "I'm not easy to be around," she said. "I know that. I see things clear and I say what I see. Most people don't like that. Thomas liked it, but Thomas had that in him, this evenness. She looked at her hands in her lap. I haven't known a lot of men with that, a man who doesn't get afraid of me when I'm clear about something. I'm not afraid of you, I said. I know, she said, that's what I'm saying. The light was moving on the cottonwoods. Come back through more regular, she said. And when you come back, stay longer than a weekend. See what this place is when it's running right. See if you can sit still here. Some men can't. I can sit still, I said. You've been riding 11 years, she said. That doesn't mean I can't sit still, I said. It means I haven't had a reason to. She was quiet. I'm not telling you to stop riding, she said. I'm not that. I wouldn't ask a man to stop being what he is. I'm saying, she looked at the land again, the kitchen garden, the cottonwoods. I'm saying there could be a place you came back to, in between the going out if you wanted. She paused. I'd keep a lamp. I had to look at my hands for a moment. There was a feeling that needed to settle before I could trust my voice. I'd want that, I said. Yes. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. The sun was going lower, the south wall still throwing warmth. After a little while she moved her shoulder so it was against mine, and we sat like that, looking out at the land that was hers and that she'd held, and that was starting, slowly, in this late February afternoon, to show the first green again. I felt the specific weight and warmth of her against my shoulder. I thought about the bolt in the pry bar and the 10 minutes in the dirt. I thought about 11 years of empty roads and cold rooms, and the sound of one horse's hooves on frozen ground. I thought about a lamp. I stayed 4 days that first time through. Greer showed me the land, walked me out to the south field where the winter grass was still dry and brown but holding good root, and to the creek line where the cottonwoods were just beginning to think about budding, and to the north fence where 3 sections needed restringing. He showed me the cattle, 31 head, thin from winter but sound, and the 2 horses in the paddock, a gray mare with a new shoe I could hear wasn't sitting right, and a black gelding that was being used for ranch work and carrying it fine. Greer was not a man who talked a great deal. I appreciated that. He showed me what needed showing and answered what I asked and didn't perform. He had that quality some men have after they've done something they're ashamed of, a particular carefulness, a doing of the right thing, now that is quiet and consistent and doesn't ask to be noticed. The gray mare's shoe I pulled and reset myself, using Greer's tools in the lean-to. He watched from across the lean-to without saying anything. When it was done, he nodded. She'd need a new set come April, he said. I know, I said. This'll get her there. We walked back to the house. Delia was in the kitchen garden with a hoe, working the earth up between the rows. She had her back to us. She didn't stop what she was doing when she heard us come. She kept working, steady and methodical, the hoe pulling clean furrows through the dark earth. Greer went to the barn. I stood by the garden fence and watched her work. She wasn't the kind of woman who stopped what she was doing to be seen. She'd finish the row and then she'd look up. She finished the row. She looked up. Shoes reset, I said. I heard, she said. Thank you. She stuck the hoe in the earth and came to the gate, pushing the latch up, coming through. Up close she smelled of turned earth and the particular sharpness of cold air worked in. There was a smear of mud on her jaw. I did not point that out. She looked at me for a moment. You're good with your hands, she said. Had to be, I said. Most men who wear a badge aren't, she said. They're good with the authority of it, the talking, the standing a certain way. You're different. Is that good? I said. Yes, she said simply, that's good. She went in to wash up and I went and sat on the south bench in the afternoon sun and looked at the land and felt something I didn't have a word for at first. And then I had the word, ease, a specific kind of ease that wasn't the same as the empty quiet of the road. The road's quiet was absence. This was presence. The sound of a hoe going into earth, a horse settling in a paddock, the smoke coming straight up from the chimney in the still air. a woman who went about her work and didn't need anything performed for her. That night Delia showed me the books and what she was planning for summer. She went through the calculations she'd made for the next 3 years, what the land could carry, what cattle prices were running, what she'd need to add and when and what it would cost against what the herd could earn. It was careful thinking, patient and long, and it was right. More than right, it was smart in a way that accounted for the bad years as clearly as the good ones. She'd built margin into the plan. She'd thought about what could go wrong. "You've seen hard years," I said. "Thomas and I had 2 bad ones back to back the second and third year," she said. "Drought and then a blue norther that took 11 head. I know what bad looks like." She turned a page. "I made sure the plan holds even if this is another bad year." "You don't need me to tell you this is good," I said. "No," she said, "but I wanted to show you." I looked at her across the table, the lamp between us throwing its low, warm light. She was looking at the ledger but not reading it. She was waiting to see what I would say. "Why," I said, "why did you want to show me?" She looked up. "'Cause you came and did the thing that needed doing and you didn't make anything of it," she said. "Because you sat in Whitmore's storeroom and listened to me and didn't try to tell me what I ought to feel. Because when I told you what I wanted, more regular, come back, we'll see, you said all right and then you came back." She looked at the lamp. "I've had a year of people deciding what I was and what I was worth and what I deserved. I wanted to show you what I actually am, what I've actually done here." I looked at the ledger, at the 3 years of calculations, at the plans. "I see it," I said. "Good," she said. And she closed the ledger, and we sat for a while in the lamplight with the sound of the night outside, the wind just starting, the first coyote far off on the south ridge. "I'll be back in 6 weeks," I said, "8 at the outside." She nodded. "The lamp," I said. She looked at me, not a question. "Leave it," I said. "When I'm out on the circuit, I know you won't be. I'm not asking you to wait up. I'm just saying I'll think better knowing it's there." She reached across the table and put her hand on the back of mine. Her hand that had been frozen and swollen and purple-white, and was now warm and capable, and doing 12 hours of work a day. "It'll be there," she said. I turned my hand over and held hers. We stayed like that for a while in the lamplight, the ledgers and the plans between us, the land outside going quiet into dark. And I thought about how a man could spend 11 years thinking he was the kind of man who moved and didn't stop, and then find out he was wrong about that. Not wrong about the moving. I'd still ride the circuit. It was good work and it was mine. The territory needed men who would go to the bad places and stand there and not move until something was set right. I was built for that. I'd be a fool to pretend otherwise. But wrong about the stopping. There was a place now, there was a lamp. And there was a woman with flat brown eyes who had sat up straight for 3 days chained to a wheel, waiting for the weather to decide. And when the weather decided, she'd said all right and meant it. Who'd taken a year of fear and hatred from a town and turned it into the thing that made her build better margins into her 3-year plan. Who had looked at me across a table and said, "I wanted to show you what I actually am." I think that's what I'd needed to find. Not someone to soften it, the work, the road, the hard parts. Someone who already knew what hard was and had decided to do the thing anyway. Someone who held on with both hands to what was hers, even when the whole town said she had no right to it. Someone who, when a stranger rode up and asked if she could stand, stood. That's what I'd needed. And here it was. I want to tell you about the second time I came back. Not the first return, that was spring, the cottonwoods in leaf, the calves in the south field. That was about seeing what I'd known was true and confirming it. The second time was different. The second time mattered more. It was early August. I'd been up to the territorial capital for a week dealing with paperwork that accumulated on the circuit like silt, depositions, warrant records, chain of custody documents for the counterfeiting materials. A complaint filed against me by a man in Cinder Creek who felt I'd handled his land dispute incorrectly, and who was wrong about that but had a lawyer. I'd been sitting at a table in a government building for 6 days writing things in triplicate in the particular careful hand you develop for legal documents. Nothing like the way you write when you're writing something real. And by the end of it I was a different kind of tired than writing makes you. A dry, empty tired. The kind where you look at your hands and don't recognize them. I came south a week early. Didn't write ahead, didn't have a way to. I just rode. It was late afternoon when I came up the track to the Marsh Ranch. Hotter than spring, the high desert had its summer smell, sage and dry rock and the faint sweetness of the creek. The kitchen garden was full-on growing, the rows dense and green, something I couldn't name from a distance climbing a stake fence on the east side. The paddock had 3 horses now, the gray mare and the black gelding, and a new chestnut that was watching me come with its ears all the way up. I didn't see Delia in the yard. I tied up at the fence and opened the gate. I heard her before I saw her from around the back of the house, a sound that took me a moment to place, a rhythmic striking, metal on something hard. I went around the corner of the house and she was there in the back, using a splitting maul on a round of oak, working through a cord of firewood that someone had cut and stacked green, and that was dry enough now to split. She had her back to me, and she hadn't heard me yet, and I stood and watched her for a moment. She was good at it. Her swing was economical, no wasted motion, no show, just the weight of the maul doing the work with her body behind it exactly right. She split a round in 2, set the halves apart, set another round, split it. Accurate, efficient. There was something in it that was almost peaceful to watch. She set a 3rd round and swung, and it split clean, and when she came up from the follow-through she glanced back and saw me. She didn't jump. She just went still for a moment, the maul in both hands, looking at me. "You're early," she said. "Week early," I said. "I was in the Capitol, paperwork, I stopped. I came because I wanted to." She looked at me for a beat. Then she set the maul head down against the stump and came toward me, pushing the braid off her shoulder. She was sweated from the work, her face flushed, and she stopped about 3 feet from me and looked at me in that level way. "You look tired," she said. "I am," I said, "not road tired, the other kind." She nodded like she knew exactly what I meant. "Come inside," she said. "I'll get you water." I followed her in. She poured water from the clay jug and set it in front of me and sat across the table and watched me drink, not performing concern, just present, looking. "Tell me about it," she said. 6 days of paperwork," I said. "Legal documents, depositions. A complaint from a man I handled correctly, who has a lawyer who knows how to make correctly look like incorrectly on paper." "Will it go anywhere?" "No," I said. But I had to sit in a room and listen to someone misrepresent what I did for 3 hours, which is its own particular kind of thing. "Yes," she said, "I know about that." I looked at her. "The town," she said, "before, months of being misrepresented, of what you actually are being turned into something else in people's mouths." She looked at the table. "You can't argue with it directly. You just have to hold on to what you know is true." "That's what you did," I said. "That's what I did," she said. "I held on to the land, to the deed, to what I knew Thomas and I had built and what I knew I could keep building. They couldn't take that from me, even when they were saying the worst of it. The truth of it was still the truth." I held the cup in both hands and let the cold of it work on my palms. "The man with the lawyer," she said, "he knows you were right." "Probably," I said. "He definitely does," she said. "People who are right don't hire lawyers to argue about it. They just say what happened." I looked at her. "You know people," I said. "I've had cause to study them," she said. We sat in the kitchen in the August afternoon with the heat outside pressing against the adobe walls and the interior cool and still. After a while she got up and started making supper without asking if I was staying. I didn't say anything. I just sat there and let the dry tired start to come out of me, The way heat comes out of you slowly in a cool room. I watched her work, the specific economy of her movements in a space she knew well. The way she moved from the work table to the stove without looking at either, because she'd done this 10,000 times in this kitchen and her body knew it. I thought about what that was, to know a place well enough that you moved through it that way. I thought about how I had never lived anywhere long enough to have that. "When does the circuit end?" she said, without turning from the stove. "What do you mean?" I said. "Your contract with the federal marshal's office. Is it annual? Is there an end to it?" I thought about that. "Annual," I said. "I've renewed it every year for 11 years. They ask, I say yes." "And if you said no?" The question sat in the air for a moment. "Then I'd be done," I said. She turned from the stove. She looked at me directly. "I'm not asking you to," she said. "I want to be clear about that. I'm asking because I'm trying to understand the shape of your life, what's fixed in it and what isn't." I looked at my hands. "I'm not sure I know," I said. "I've been saying yes for 11 years and I never thought about whether I was saying yes because I wanted to or because it was what I knew." She turned back to the stove. "That seems like something worth knowing," she said. "Yes," I said. And that was all she said about it. She didn't press. She didn't offer a conclusion. She just put it there and left it for me to carry, which was exactly the right thing to do. That night after supper, I sat on the south bench in the dark for a long time. The stars out here were the same stars I'd been looking at from empty roads for 11 years, but they looked different from this bench. Closer somehow, more specific. Greer had gone to the bunkhouse he'd built off the lean-to. The ranch was quiet. From inside the house I could see the lamp burning in the front window. Not for me, she'd put it there before she knew I was coming. She just kept it there. I sat with the question she'd put in the room. I didn't answer it that night. It wasn't a thing you answered in one night. But I sat with it and let it have some room. 6 weeks later I came back south through Reed Rock. The cottonwoods were in full leaf and the kitchen garden was up. I could see the rows of green from the road. New calves in the south field, 4 or 5 of them, stumble-legged in the new grass. The lamp was in the window. Not burning, it was afternoon, no need to burn it in daylight, but it was in the window, set there. I turned Roan off the road and came up the track to the fence, and tied up and opened the gate and went to the door and knocked. She opened it. She looked at me, I looked at her. "You're a day early," she said. "Rode hard," I said. She stepped back from the door and let me in, and I took off my hat and hung it on the peg by the door. There was a peg. It must have been Thomas's, and it was empty now. And I looked at the table where the ledgers were spread, because there was always work to be done. And at the stove where something was cooking that smelled of something I hadn't smelled in months, something real and warm, and at the lamp in the window. She was watching me look at the lamp. "I told you," she said. "You did," I said. And I put my hat on the peg. And that was that.